Okay. All right. So the first value is predictable. You know this is going to be the initial value that you set here. Whether it's a string value, a Boolean value, it doesn't matter. It's always going to be the initial value that you put here. Now the setter function, right? The setter function does one thing: change the state. That is what it does. It has only one job, right? Just replace the state we have with something different, with whatever the user gives us. So let's, first of all, I wanted to explain this. So it means if I come and say 0, we know 0 is the string value, but 1 is the function. If I check the console, I should see it. I go to console, you can see it's a function. If I, in namestate, if I just say, I think I'll leave it that way, let me not confuse you anyway. You can see it's just a function called dispatch set state, basically. So let's walk through it. So the setter function sets state or changes the state from the initial value to whatever you give it, whatever value you set. So we can try to do that. Let me try to explain that with an example. So let's assume, right, we want this state, the piece of state that we have here, we want it to change when something happens on the page. Okay, so when we click this button, this click me. So let me log the name state, but before I do that, I want to destructure. I don't want to keep doing name state 1, name state 0. I'm going to pluck out the values from the array. What this means, because I realized maybe this is also something that is not clear. If I have, for example, a normal array. So let's define a normal array here. Const first names or let me just say city names. Set this to an array. Nairobi, Sydney, Kampala. Now, let's say, right, I want to have new variables. So for example, Kenya's capital, I want a variable called Kenyan capital. Obviously, I want to set this value to city names 0 because that is Nairobi, right? If I want to set Australia's capital, I'll say same thing, but now I'll just change the index to 1. Want Uganda's, I'll just change the index to 2, right? That's how I would declare variables to represent Nairobi, Sydney, and Kampala. So if I wanted, say, Australia, then change this to 1 to Sydney, and then I can do the same for set this to 2. So now UG capital is Kampala, Australia capital is Sydney, Kenyan capital is Nairobi, right? But what if I did not want this extra overhead of doing const and then the name and then city names and then the index? We would destructure the array. So instead of doing it this way, what we could instead do is const and then have the square brackets, set it equal to city names, like that. And then now if you want to set the Kenyan capital, right, the variable called Kenyan capital to be equal to the first index of the array, then you simply pass it in here as the first variable name. So I will comment this out. And then if I want to do the same thing I did with const Kenyan capital and then city names, you just replace, because now we are declaring variable names, right? And mapping them to the elements in the array. So the first element, Nairobi, right? The Kenyan capital variable, the name is going to be assigned to Nairobi. The second one, Australia capital, will be assigned to Sydney. Then the third one, UG capital, will be assigned to Kampala. So we've essentially done the same thing, but you can see this syntax is easier to read. It's less boiler code. So that is what destructuring is. Simply the values, instead of doing it this way, Kenyan capital, then city names, and then square brackets 0, and then doing the same thing for Australia. You can just destructure, then create variable names directly and assign them based off of the index. So the first variable name is going to be Nairobi. So Kenyan capital is now Nairobi, right? Then this is now Australia capital is now Sydney. Then UG capital is now Kampala. So this is the variable name, and then this is the value. This is the variable name, and then this is the value. So they are going hand in hand. Okay, that is what destructuring is. That is what array destructuring is. Even with object destructuring, it's the same thing again. But for now, we are first of all talking about array destructuring. When you get to the props, you're going to see it again, but now not for arrays, now for objects. So I want to emphasize this again. So now if I do CL and I console log Kenyan capital, it's in Nairobi. So we created the variable name Kenyan capital, but also gave it a value that is equal to the first index of the city names array. If I do the same thing for Australia capital, I now see Sydney. So it is working. So we essentially did this thing that we did here. So the 3 lines of code, we have replaced them with just 1 line of code. That is what we are doing by when we say we are destructuring. I hope that is making sense, because I feel like that's somewhere else that a lot of people get confused when they see the square brackets syntax. So now UG capital is Kampala. If you add one more thing here, right, and you don't have like a value for it, a variable name, then it will not show up. So zinaambatana to the first one is this, the second one is this, the third one is this. So now, anybody with a question regarding that or something I need to clear up? Because now I want to destructure this use state. Anybody who is lost? Something I need to go through again. Okay. So that is what destructuring is. So now we know for a fact that our name state returns 2 elements, value, the initial value, and the setter function, something to set the state, right? So means instead of doing it this way, we could destructure, right? Just destructure the thing. And now the naming is now up to us, right? So we can say first name. The first name will represent the first index of our array that is coming back. So first name should now be Jake, because Jake is the first element in the array. And then we have set first name. So now the second element in the array is going to equal this function because we have destructured. I'll put a comment here. So we are destructuring the 2 elements come from use state. That is what we're doing here. So use state returns array with 2 comments. So now we don't have to say like the way we were doing it initially, where we had to use square brackets to get the index. So if you wanted the value, you'd have to say the name of the variable you gave use state and then index 0 if you wanted to get the value. And then if you wanted the setter function, then now you would use index 1. But now because we are destructuring, you can just use it directly. CL first name stick, and then CL set first name function. This is a function. This is a symbol that represents a function. Is the destructuring clear? Is this syntax now making sense? When you're using is clicked and set is clicked, the value, set a function. So let me go Chanikuje, and I will just have a paragraph. I will give it, what did we call our variable? First name. So I'll call this first name. And then I will simply come here, add another button, change first name. Change first name state. So I now want to change this value, right? Using the setter function, this function that we use, right? This second element here, this thing here that we use, I want to use it to change the value of Jake, from Jake to something else. So you can just come here, want to change it on click. When we click this, what do we want to happen? So we can have our anonymous function. And then here we can call set first name. And set first name takes in the value. What do you want to set the state to? What do you want to change it to when you click button? So now here you give it the new value. It takes in the new value now. Okay, so now it can take in something here. So this. So set first name as the keeper knows about our state. It knows about our first name state. So it knows that whatever value we get should replace the previous state. You can see when I hover over it, set first name and then the value. What do you want to change our state to? So from Jake to Chris, that is what we want to do. So now it's Chris. So the setter function is responsible for changing the state, changing that value from X to Y, from Jake to Chris. So basically any state that you want to change, you can use now the setter function to set the state to something different. Any question? Catherine, is it making sense? You had asked about that function.
Yeah, it's clear now. Thank you.
It's clear now.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously, if you change this value again, so we can have another button just to see it working. And just have another button down here. And I can change this to change Chris. change to Mike. Then I can just change this value here from Chris to Nick. So when we call this button, it calls set first name, the setter function, and then gives it the value Chris. When we call the second button, it also calls set first name, but we give it a different value here. So if I refresh the page, we should go back to Jake. Then if I change to Chris, it goes to Chris. If I change to Mike, it becomes Mike. Again, Chris, Mike, Chris, Mike. Because of the setter function that takes in the new value. What value do you want to have now as the new state? Is it clear? Hope umeshika, hope umeelewa. I will remove this mpaka hapa. So I presume that's talked about state for now 2 days. But I hope it's now making a bit of sense. Okay. So the square bracket should not confuse you, you're simply restructuring. Now let's go to props. Properties, a prop. That is what it is. So for me to explain this, what I am going to do is, let's see, I'm trying to see how we can use another example for me to explain it, a simpler example. Maybe I could just remove this for now. And then can even remove this. And I'll just have a paragraph here that says this is, I need to have my styles back. What did I remove in my div? Just check my CSS. I moved there up. To JSX, then okay. This is our static paragraph. So something very simple like that, and then let me just go and change the size of that paragraph. Okay, misspelled something there. So this is a static paragraph. So we just want to look at, we just have a div with a class name of app and a paragraph. Okay. Now, if you wanted to turn this paragraph into a component, so I'll simply go into my components, create a new component, paragraph JSX. Then there is an extension, a VS Code extension called, I think, React Code Snippets that you can use instead of doing function and then paragraph and then exporting. You can use it. You can use the React Code Snippets extension to just do something like this. So you can see it's telling you right here what it's doing. React functional export component. So if I press enter, it should give me the function and then also export it. And it uses the name we used, paragraph, as the name of the function as well, which is what you want.
What's the name of that extension?
We just React. It is, where did it go? It is, I think I should be able to share it. So I'll send this in the chat so that you can download it. Okay. Right, so now let's go back to our, or I will wait for, if you don't have the extension, then you can just do function, paragraph, and then return a paragraph. And this, the way it is. Anyone who needs me to wait for them, because I want us to do it step by step.
Give like an extra minute here, please.
Okay. I hope you guys are following along as well, because I think you can only be able to understand it better if you're actually coding along. Sometimes if you're struggling with something, maybe coding along will help you grasp it a bit faster. So don't worry, I might sound like a broken record sometimes, repeating something over and over again, but it's because I'm trying to get you guys to have the fundamentals as early as possible. Because if you don't understand use state at this point and we move into a more complicated thing, you're always going to have that overhead of, oh, I did not really understand what use state does. So it's always going to be, anytime you think about it, you're always going to be afraid of use state or any of the hooks. So repeating it over and over again is, I'm trying to reinforce those ideas. You know, I want it to be like a song. Every time you remember use state, what does use state return? An array. It always returns an array with two elements, the initial value and a setter function. Right? What are the square brackets doing when you say const square brackets is equals to use state and the initial value? The brackets are restructuring the array so that we can both create variable names for the values in use state as well as assign the values. So you're declaring a variable name, but you're also giving it a value immediately. We continue, Samuina, or anyone else who was also writing the code.
Yeah.
So I will just go back to my app.jsx and then I'll just plug this out. This is a static paragraph. I'll take it, I'll cut it, and then I'll put it in my paragraph component. Just replace the whole thing. It's just a paragraph. And then I will go back to my app.jsx. Then I want to import that paragraph into my app.jsx. So you should just be able to get the paragraph if you just start typing. If you don't, then you'll have to import it Hapajuk directly. We'll have to do import paragraph from the current folder and then go into the components folder and get me the paragraph. So let me also just remove some of these things here. Very little noise. So you should now have this is a static paragraph back in the UI. Okay. Okay, I hope everybody's there now. Okay, so now let's say we don't want this paragraph to always say this is, I'm supposed to say this is a static. This is a static paragraph. Let's say we want this value to be dynamic. We don't want to always have the same paragraph all the time. So one way of doing it is you could obviously declare some sort of state here. Then I'll give it a new value here depending on some state. But we've covered state quite a bit. So let's talk about props. Let's assume the value that paragraph needs, so this is a static paragraph, comes from the parent. Okay, the parent is the one that has that value, that paragraph value. So again, we will come back here. We want to use our state again. So let's declare a new state. State equal to use state. Set the initial state. So I can just give it a false value. I can just say false is the initial state. And then I can call it is static. And then set is static. So actually this should be true because of what I'm trying to do. So I'll just set it to a true value. So again, I'm just setting a state called is static, and then the setter function set is static, and setting the value to true. So by default, the value is true. So if you console log is static, you should get a true value, a true, basically. Now let's say you want the value of paragraph, whatever we have in paragraph, this text here, it needs to change based off of the state. So what we have in is static. So remember what we said yesterday. Think about props like attributes that you have in your HTML elements. So our paragraph requires some extra information to perform properly. We want to change this is static to something different. This is a static paragraph to something different based off of the value of the static. If static is true, then give us where did it go? Give us this is a static paragraph. If it's false, give us something different. Give us a dynamic value. Okay, so who wants to take a crack at it? How can we do that? So when the value, so when static is true, I want the paragraph to say this is a static paragraph, but when it is false, I want to change the value to something else. Like this is a dynamic paragraph. How can we do that? We want to change this is static paragraph depending on what the user inputs. I think where we can start before we do that, maybe let's first of all make this value a prop. This is a static paragraph. Let's turn it into a prop. Let's say this value is coming from the parent. Before we can talk about like how to change it, I think that might confuse you less. So I can say text equal to, so this is the text I want to give my paragraph. Instead of hard coding it here, I will remove this. Now we have nothing. So now I want to get that value from here. So the paragraph takes in a prop called text. And then the text can be, this is a static paragraph. Still nothing, because we have not consumed the prop from our paragraph. Now, this thing that comes back here, the prop, this props is an object. And if you console log it here, You'll see it's an object that has a text property. And like Joseph mentioned yesterday, functional components only accept props. This is the only thing they take in. And the props has a type of, it's an object. That is the data type, it's an object. So if I want to get this text, because I know it's an object, I could just access that value with dot text. It give me that the console. You can see for Console Ninja, it's right here, but I will also check in my console. This is a static paragraph. You can see these are coming from the initial, when I console logged props, it was an object with text. So now, again, this is a lot of work because you can imagine if you had a lot of properties, you had a text prop, you had a color prop, you had a size prop, you'd have to do this for all of them. Anytime you want to access or use those values, you'd have to say props dot color, props dot. So let me just do an example here. App.tsx, if I had more than one prop, if I have another one, color, that's to green, size, set that to large. What else can we have? Is para, set that to true. You know, so all these are props. Anything that you've passed into as an attribute, where they look like attributes, these are all props. And if you go back to our paragraph, if we stop console logging props.text and just console log props, you will see it is an object with all those properties, all those things as properties. You can see color, is para, size, and the text. So it means every time you want to use it, you'd have to say props.text, props.color, props.isPara. So a simpler way to do it instead of doing it that way, right? Just like our example in state, instead of having the state and then using the square brackets to access the individual information that is coming back from the array, you destructure. You destructure the props, because we can destructure because we know for a fact that this is always going to be an object. So we know that assumption is there. We know this is going to be an object. So instead of using props, instead of using the name, we know props is an object, we could just destructure that. And then we want to get those values. Whatever we are destructuring are the property names, the names that we are using, which is text, color, size, and isPara. So now here, you can just say, I want text. Now decide what you want from the props. If you don't want everything, you don't have to get everything. Just tell it exactly what you want. So what we are doing is we are creating a variable name and then assigning it the value of whatever is coming back as a value here. So text is what we want. That's the only thing we want. And if I come here and I do a console log of text, you should see this is a static paragraph. It is. But now we need this value here in the paragraph itself. So I will remove this. Simply say text. And we are back to where we started. But now the value is dynamic, right? If I go back to app.tsx and I change this text value, or I add some more information, this is not going to get passed down, then it's going to give me that value. So one of the first things you should have noticed, props, first of all, the value type of a prop is an object, not an array. That's the first difference. State is an array, right? The return value is an array. Props are objects. Props are passed down, right? They are arguments to functional components. It's what you pass here. So even this has a prop. Even this has a prop. It's empty because there's nothing being passed down to it. Because if you console log it, it's going to be empty. You can see it is an object, but it's empty. Every single component you have made up to this point has the props. So the props are just an object that all functional components have access to. Is that making sense? Someone wants some clarification on anything? Anyone who has something to add in regards to props or a question about props?
Yeah, what was said in the other session? Something about state being passed. Is it passed up or passed down? Because now you've mentioned props are passed down in their arguments to functions. What was said about state? I can't quite remember in that same regard.
Okay, I think
State is passed down, up. I can't remember.
I think it's Joseph who made that statement. Joseph, do you want to chip in?
What specifically? Can you ask again?
I was asking.
Hmm.
Ian said props are passed down, and it brought to memory what he said, I think, in meeting about state being passed or cannot be passed from parent to children. I'm not so sure I got that right. Just please explain that a bit.
I guess you're talking about props. Props is the one that is passed from parent components to children components. Like it's unidirection. It only goes from parents to children. You can't pass a prop from a child to a parent. That is, you can only pass it downwards from a parent to child. That is like something that is nested inside another component is the child of that component that is nesting it. So that's basically it. So, but if if you have state, you can also pass state as props, and it will still follow the same rules basically. If you want to share state between two components, it also has to go downwards using props, like from parent to child. Yes.
Yeah.
Someone else has a question.
Yeah, I had a question maybe to on that issue. The one someone is asking, there's the aspect of like lifting state. I think it's when you want to pass data from a child to another child, like two components that are siblings. No, because you can't do that. You'll have to pass the data through the parent, then out to the child that you want. I think there's something like that. Joseph, is it true?
But lifting up state, and that's where prop drilling comes in. So, for example, if you have maybe three nestings, like a parent that has a child component within it, then the child component has another component. Like you have three nesting, a parent, child, and a grandchild. Let's just say it like that. So sometimes you might find a situation where you want to like state that is on the parent, for example, to go to the grandchild. So you can't pass it directly from parent to grandchild. So basically, if you find yourself in such a situation, that's why they say that you lift it up to the nearest parent, then so that you can share it amongst the children. Like, for example, like in that our example, if you have something that you want to share amongst multiple, maybe child or grandchildren, you might find yourself passing like a prop from a parent to a child. Like a child might receive a prop that he doesn't use, basically, so that you again pass it down to another grandchild. I'm not sure if I'm making sense. So you might, if you have a big application, you might find that it's actually very cumbersome to use props and prop drilling and only state to manage global state because of
Yeah,
that prop drilling and the need for now lifting up state. You might find that, for example, app is the main, usually the main component of in React. You might find that you have maybe maybe for example, three components in app, and those three components have other components, those other components have other components. So you might get in a situation where you have to lift up state to up, like to the topmost component, and then pass it down to a child, pass it down to a grandchild, pass it down to a great grandchild, whereby some of these components might not even be needing it. They'll just be used to pass it down. That's what we call prop drilling. Like you're drilling down state. Drilling down props. And that's why now we have global state management tools like Context API and Redux. So that's basically what they come in to solve the problem of prop drilling, whereby some components are just passing down states, are just being used to pass it down, whereby they're not even using it just because of the unidirectional nature of props and how they can be passed only downwards.
Yeah. Yeah, so lifting it up, as Joseph has said, is simply means put your state in a common parent. Because so if we have two paragraphs, for example, that each have their own state, those states, they are separate. They're not shared. So let's do an example. I'm going to create a heading component. I'm going to scaffold it. Then here, I'm going to define a new state. Then I'm going to say heading. I'm going to use state actually. So I'm going to say const equals to use state heading in this component one. Comp. What am I trying to do? From heading one, and then I'm going to set this to heading. Don't need to use the setter because I don't need it. Now let's just set this to heading. Then I'll define another component. No, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to show you that the two things are different. What am I trying to do? Instead of doing this, it's true. If I go back to my up to JSX, it's a very simple component just called heading, and it just returns true. Or I can just say it is And then let's change this to H2. I can import it here. So this value, this heading, this component, if I create another one, they are not sharing the same. If you were to change, like if you were to give this a prop, that changes the text. This is a heading that was to change this thing here. It would only change it for one of them, but not all of them, because they are separate. They are two entities because of functional programming and scoping. If I was to have a prop here, come here and have a prop, heading prop, then replace this heading. I want it to be this. So right now there's nothing, but if I come back to my app.jsx and I give my heading prop, and this is heading from one, I'll give this one a different one. Heading from two. So you can see there is a separation of concerns. I was trying to show there, I've forgotten, I've lost my train of thought. But to Joseph's point, the passing up, lifting up state is simply just put your state where it's accessible to any child component that is using that piece of state. I actually have a very good example on the React documentation, like how to change values. I'll send a link to that later. But is there a question in regards to props? From our example with the paragraph, this is not a static paragraph. Okay, so now let's say we want this text value to be different based off of this is static state. So when static is true, we want to set the text to be this is not a this is a static paragraph, so I remove this. But when the state is false, so when this is static is false, I want to have a different text. How would we go about doing that? Let's see. When is static is true, set the text prop to this. When it's false, set it to this is not. How would we implement this? We want this text to change based off of the state of the static. Anyone who has an idea of how to do that? Just to give it a try. Mambo, is Mambo still here? To give it a shot. or Evans? You want to try it? Wants to try? How do we change this value?
Where do you want it to change? Within the passing in or inside the component?
When we pass it in here. Yeah.
You can basically maybe use a ternary, I guess.
So because we are consuming JavaScript, and then check, right?
Can you open paragraph first, just for a second? Okay. So we want to be passing the is static down to the paragraph, right?
No, no.
Okay. So is static space, yeah. Then the first one, if it's true, which one did you want to go in?
Yeah.
And then the other one.
So now this means if we change the value of this from true to false, we should get a different text here. So let's turn this to false.
It's more or less just an expression. You know,
Yeah.
that's why it's so important to know. Like, that's why people tell you you have to know JavaScript before you learn React, because most of this stuff is actually just JavaScript. And then now, with the knowledge of JavaScript, we'll be able to distinguish between React and JavaScript. That's very important because that's simply just an expression. And yeah, just a JavaScript expression.
Yeah. I think the thing to remember is anytime you see curly braces, it means you can write JavaScript there. Anytime you see curly braces, you can write JS. Yeah. That's why we can do a ternary here, because we have our curly braces. Okay, so now let's do this.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Is there ever a time where if you're coming from vanilla JavaScript land, maybe if else, is that time that we are settling for the ternary operator because it's more compact?
Yes.
Is there a
more
time
compact.
like if else is used?
For me personally, I've not used it anywhere, but you can.
In React, yeah?
You can. You can use it because this is just JavaScript land hapa kwa hizi curly braces, but it's more code, and most of the time you're normally just checking two things, whether it's true or false. If when you're using like if else, most of the time sometimes you have more than two options. You have an if, and then an else if, and then maybe another else if. So this is just I think it's clearer. So normally you're just trying to check one of two things, one of two states. The state can only be one of two things, right? A Boolean is not made up of more than two things. It's always either true or false. There's no other state.
Okay, makes sense. Because I'd thought about if else and then it felt like it would be too clumsy on line 14. But yeah, I think venye tu Nani Joseph is saying, you need to have a good understanding of vanilla JavaScript before diving into React.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So let's do one more. So now within the paragraph, we know we are also getting a color prop, which is green. We want to change the color of the paragraph to green, the text. So obviously the first step would be to get that prop color. And now here, who wants to walk me through it? I want to change the color of the text to green. Because from our parent, we are passing down the color green. And then I want to use that green color in our paragraph here as the color of the text. Anybody who wants to try?
Maybe I can use that to showcase a nice use of if now, if else, maybe to someone.
Okay.
Although it will be a bit verbose, definitely you can do it with a ternary. But yeah, assuming it was like something different, there's a popular way of doing like short circuiting using the if keyword. So maybe we can use that just showcase a good way of using maybe the if keyword or yeah, even else.
Okay.
So yeah, so assuming you want to do something according to the props, like you want to do to return a different UI according to what is coming in from the props, you can have a conditional. So just put an if.
Where do you put it?
Just on top of this return, but it will be a good showcase of now using short circuiting. The most popular thing it will be short circuiting using if. But you can also use else if you want. Then you can just check the color. Was it green or
green? Yeah.
You just say the condition. Maybe color is equal to green. Then, if this condition is true, so this is where short circuiting comes in. We return P, return what is underneath there. Just can even copy it.
So we just take this the way it is.
Yeah, the way it is. This is a very popular pattern in React. Then now let's change the style of this one to green. It's a bit verbose. I know we could have used the ternary, but it's a good showcase of short circuiting in React. So basically, if the condition is true, the second return will never be reached. It basically just short circuits and returns that piece of UI and exits. So just let's do style color is equals to color colon, then whichever color you wanted to put. So like components are pretty powerful. You can do a lot of things. You can do a lot of things depending on your props, and that's why even like most of these popular libraries are possible. They're just using, for example, a React library, just manipulating what is like produced depending on the prop.
Yeah.
So yeah, so currently the color is green, so we're just returning the inside the conditional. But if you change it maybe to red now within the condition, we'll return the second one. So assuming it was like something different, like you want to render, for example, something different, for example, a navbar for mobile and a navbar for desktop, you can have a condition with a media query inside there. If it's met, you just output a different navbar depending on the condition. So this is pretty popular. It's called short circuiting. You won't see a lot of if else. You could even say if color then else return, but you will still need to return something else. So like this is very popular. And as you can see, if you change it to red, it will now return the second.
Yeah,
the first one will it goes back to black. Basically, it's returning a different piece of UI depending on the condition inside that if statement. So somewhere this is a very common use of what you were saying before. But for things that you want this or this, like either of these two, a good thing to reach for will be the ternary operator.
Yeah. Can we try that with, because something I've seen being used a lot is buttons. When buttons are depending on what kind of button you want. So let's try to change the color of a button based off of the type of button it is. So whether it's a delete button or a submit button. So if it's a submit button, we can have it having a green background color, and if it's a delete button, then it can have a red background.
Yeah, basically, if you've used any component library,
yeah,
if you want to change color, that's basically what you do. You just pass in props. Maybe you can try that to see whether how it goes. Like basically create a button that is reusable that you can use. Basically pass in something to change it to look at a bit different.
We already have a button. Let's click me. So okay, I just want
to. So it already has text.
Has some text, yeah. We can just pass them as
props,
the implementation. Yeah. So
maybe let's head into the component first.
Okay.
The button itself.
Let me remove this just for now. Less noise.
The most common prop, if you it's usually like variant.
Variant,
Variant, yeah. It's the most common thing you'll see in component libraries. So we want to, what do you want to change? Like the background color, but you can use this. That's what short circuiting just for it. That's as a practice. So if variant
is equal to
maybe danger, like the good old bootstrap days. Danger, we'll output it with a red background, maybe. You can copy the return down there.
Else it remains that way.
Yeah, and you could even maybe have another prop for the text so that it's also that dynamic. This is like a good showcase of reusability using props, because basically they're more or less important when you want to have something reusable. So you embed the text there, and also on top you can create another variant for success. Let's just have 3 returns. Just copy that top if. Then success will be green. Then the last one, just the normal one. You can. So let's go and like define like 3 buttons side by side. And then for the first one, maybe pass in just the text can be different, and then the variant also different. You can just pass it, it's a string, so you can just pass it as a string. So automatically that component becomes reusable. You can have just that one button and use it to create 200 different buttons. So this is just like a very simple version of what in React you'll hear something called component library. You might get an employer telling you that I want you to create a component library for us. For example, if you have a design system in a company whereby you know how all the buttons will look like, how all the, for example, cards will look like, you can just create like a component library with the buttons, and then just someone that doesn't need to style a button and they're coming to use it. They just pass in the props. For example, variant danger, the variant success, it can be anything, and you can name it anything. But yeah, basically that's, as you can see, we have 3 different buttons, and you can even maybe define even a function, and then
depending on the variant, it behaves differently. So this is basically how props are used for usability and to share pieces of data or pieces of state from one component to the other.
Yeah, and now you can see it. Now it's like the users for it are now infinite. Because assuming you're building a page or a website or an application, and the styling for your buttons is very similar, but the background color changes depending on what you're using that button for. So instead of like rewriting the markup over and over again, and stuff like the background colors and whatnot, you can just include the button and give it different props depending on what you're using, like what you want it to look like. Yeah. So I hope that makes some sense. Okay. All right. Any question?
Just go
Any
back
question?
kidogo to the button.jsx file. Why are we using double inaitwaje, double parentheses kwa background hapo?
Here,
Mm.
Joseph, you want to explain this?
I know we've said it before, but where React inanipeleka at 100 words per hour. So just explain, please.
Why do we have?
So in React, basically, this is not HTML, it's JSX. So we have a few things that are different. So styles are defined inside an object. Basically, I think Ian said this. The first calibres is for now entering somewhere where you can write JavaScript. And then the second one is basically just an object with keys and values. So that's it. And as for camel case, can you just like put dash color? Background dash color will not be a valid object key. And that's why you have to do camel case. You see, automatically you're getting squiggly lines. Yani, if you go to your basics of JavaScript, you cannot have like an object key like that unless it has double like quotations around it. You remember that how that is done?
Yeah.
Like, and that's why we have like bracket notation, whereby like if you have something that has those quotation marks, you access it using the name within the quotation marks. So basically this is just JavaScript. In JSX, you write styles in objects, and object keys cannot have a dash between the names, because basically in JavaScript that is not possible. It's a syntactical mistake.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, and even if you want, you can even have a style.js and then now put them outside there and then import them. Like, you're free to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Like, you're only limited by your imagination. You can do whatever you want. You can have, instead of having style.css, you can be having style.ts, style.js, and then you export your objects. Basically, that's just plug them inside that style tag. They'll just work.
Yeah. So Samuel, remember what we said. Anytime you want to have JavaScript, you want to include some JS with your JSX, you have your mustache, your single curly braces, right? If you look at anywhere we are using, right, like right here, we first of all start with, we just put the curly braces, right?
Yeah.
As Joseph amesema, now your styles now are objects. So with that knowledge of JavaScript, it means if you take this out, and you define it as an object, right? And then you just pass it here. It works. So that's why we had the double mustache, because that other one simply meant just the object to represent the styling. So I just declared a new variable called styles, set that to an object, and then in my style, I just gave it a variable name. This is the same as taking this object the way it is and putting it directly here where we can consume JavaScript. It making sense?
Yeah, that's clear.
Okay. Right. That's a nice question. Anybody else? Because I was waiting for someone to ask why we have double.
So Ian,
Mhm.
in Vue.js, we pass data from the child component to the parent component using custom events, using the emit methods. Ndio?
Yeah.
So is there a similar way in React ama lazima tu nini ufanye vile
Yeah.
Joseph alisema?
I think there was a way to do it with class-based components. Sindio, Joseph? Was there a way to pass like props or state from children to parents when
parents,
you're
yeah.
using, like passing it
From
up?
children, passing it up,
Yeah.
children to parents.
Yes.
It's not possible. That's
Mm.
now that's now global state. You'll definitely need another tool like the context API
Yeah.
or
Oh,
Redux.
okay.
Yeah. Actually, prop drilling is for very, very small applications. If you do it for a large app,
Mhm.
you might find drilling down state like down 3 components.
Yeah.
And then it will be very, very hectic to even know what's happening in that code. But with the context, you can just basically create a context and then put a provider, and then you can whichever like components are within that provider will automatically have that piece of state. I guess we'll look at also the use context as we look
Yeah.
at the hooks. So we'll explore. We can explore it more with then.
Oh, okay. So yeah, and in this
Basically, use
case,
context was invented to solve prop drilling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ben.
so in this case, it's like Vue has a small advantage.
Well, you can say that it does, but you see also the idea of like putting state in a parent component
Mhm.
eradicates your shida ya having to pass like data or state up to something. It always goes downwards. And
Yeah.
it's even easier to think about it evil.
Yes, true.
So hiyo sometimes unapatanga hiyo, the fact that you're passing stuff up can confuse you because even the syntax for doing that is not very,
Yeah, it's not friendly.
it's not very friendly. Before you
Yeah.
understand what is going on, it confuses you a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why they have now state management libraries like your Pineas and your Vuex, because now in that way you don't need to do all that passing down of state that way or passing it up, because you have a single source of truth that represents your whole application.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
good question. Anybody else? You know, this, it might look sometimes it might look intimidating, but if you can just learn to look at JSX, like first of all, look at the JavaScript in it, because more than half of it is actually JavaScript. Like the differences that you will see between like your vanilla JavaScript and JSX, ni kidogo sana, they are very small. But most of the time you're just writing JavaScript. This is just JavaScript. If this is just JavaScript, return the parentheses. No, this is just JavaScript up and down. This is just an object. And you'll see that thing kila mahali. Anytime you're using it, you'll just see the same thing. More often than not, you're just writing JavaScript. So if you have a good understanding of JavaScript, then you know how to manipulate JSX. Okay. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed today's session. I think we've talked about props in detail, or we've at least tried to do that today. So maybe you guys can go and do some practice to pass props down to different components, see how it works. I would advise you guys to go to the React documentation. They have a very, like the tutorial they have for explaining the basics of React is very nice. Yeah, and it's very interactive. So definitely go and check it out. Okay. All right. So we can end there for today. Let me go back to the main screen. Able to do this. Okay. So again, thank you guys for joining today's session. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope React is not giving you such a hard time. And even if it is, that's normal. It happens when you start, then it gets easier over time. But I hope the sessions are beneficial to you guys. So without further ado, you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. Na tuonane kesho to discuss the next topic. Good night. Mesusu. Daddy. Ini dogi.
Ian, ni aje?
Niaje? Poa.
Fiti. Jana uliniambia utaniweka kwa group but si
Nilisahau. Hebu ni text kwa WhatsApp.
sawa.
Ndio. Sasa niko namba yako.
Mimi niko na yako. Nilipatanga
Hebu ni
pale.
text.
Sawa.
Ni text alafu nitakuongeza kwa hiyo group.
Sawa.
Sawa.
Alafu
Mhm.
kuna interview fulani nilikuwa nachekia. Unajua Theo, ule msee wa React?
Theo hapana.
He's a React evangelist. Alikuwa na interview Ivan Yu. Na ni vile nilisikia. I wish unaweza sikiza hiyo interview ya.
Hebu nitumie hiyo link uko nayo.
Hebu niangalie. Wacha niangalie kwa history.
That interview.
As in nani? So huyo Theo, of course anakuanga biased na React, like he is a React developer.
Yeah.
So kuna time alitrash Vue and wase hawakubambika. So alikuwa na so hizo vitu zenye zinafanyanga nini asipende Vue. Ndizo alikuwa anauliza Ivan, kwa nini mnafanyanga vitu zingine hivi? And ukisikia perspective ya nani ya Ivan from yani how things are done in Vue, man, you appreciate Vue a lot more. So if Ivan was saying that his first nini is the developer experience, hiyo ndio wanaangalia kwanza. React inaangalia functionality kwanza, ndio sinaonanga React ikwangi friendly for even beginners. Kwanza huwa wanaangalia the functionality before now they come to. But sa Vue ni the other way around. And how he came up with the context API, but you know, he said he's adding some other things zenye ziko kwa kina Solid.js into Vue soon, so I'm pretty excited for Vue.
Yeah. So even the suspense component which you can wrap on your, so bado iko in development, it's still in iko complete.
Oh, nice.
your suspense, what it allows you to do, it allows you to have top level awaits without having an async function.
Oh.
So ukitaka kufetch data, you don't need to wrap it in an async function. You just
Ooh, yeah, that's the same thing na akina Solid hufanya.
hata nini iko nayo inaitwa aje? It's already built into Next. Next already iko nayo.
Yeah, and so hata nani huyo Theo shida yake pia ilikuanga kwa kina Next. He was saying that like right now unaona React na push watu to Next.js. Alikuwa nauliza why is Vue wameseparate Vue na Next like why? So yani that interview to me was very interesting.
Ni lini? Ilitolewa lini? How long ago was that?
I think a week ago. Nimekutumia link kwa
okay, hiyo ni juzi tu basi. That's a very recent.
Angalia chat za nini hii session.
Nimecheck. Bunta watch.
Usikize wakiargue wakinini. Yani iko tu sawa.
Bunta watch. Alafu unajua pia like there's very interesting features like kuna feature inaitwa teleport.
Hiyo sifahamu.
So basically sasa zile uko na in your index.html file mali wewe unawekanga your whole application pale kwa root. So everything that is reactive is within that app.
Yeah.
Ndio. Teleport allows you to have another div chini ya that root app, and then you give it an ID, and then in your view, you can now use interactivity outside of the root div.
Oh.
You basically normally you cannot do that. If you have your index.html, alafu you have the div with the ID of root, and then you have another div chini yake, that div is not reactive. But if you wanted to make it reactive in Vue, sasa you can use teleport. Teleport will teleport your functionality of Vue to that div, to another div.
Hey, that's nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Hey, hizo features zinakaa very exciting.
Yeah, they are very nice. Niliwatch kwa hiyo, see they had a Vue.js
conference. Hiyo sijaona mimi.
Iko.
Ebu niambie namba yako ina
0705 977 072
0705
977 072
072
072 mwisho.
97 70 72. Nika nilipoteza. Haiko.
Ni text tu.
Acha ni
text alafu nitakuadd kwa group.
Sawa.
But I feel like mi mara mingi napatanga I prefer to use Vue without meta frameworks.
Yeah.
Even though you'll have to do like a bit more work, things like set up router or setting up state management. Obviously kuna hiyo overhead, but I think for a small application, if you do not need all the...
You don't need hizo za server side
rendering.
Hizo actually hizo zitakuwa nini to your they'll slow down your application juu packages hautumii
kubwa juu hata the time it takes to start Next substantial ni si kidogo.
You umework na Next?
Yeah, I've worked with the Next mpya hata.
Mi sijaitumia Next. Okay, sijaipata use case yake.
Tumia Next. Fine. But will pay for in terms of application. Because when you bundle, you have more.
Una lost?
Nasema Next
Oh.
inakujanga na hiyo extra overhead ya ni more packages, but I think when you deploy it, it's not as bulky, because when you deploy it, it does tree shaking, so inatoanga ini excess.
Yeah. Na hydration vile nilikuwa nasikiza Ivanio kibonga hiyo story. Yani ndio nilielewa hydration kabisa, yani how JavaScript frameworks they first ship the HTML, then user akitaka functionality sasa JS zinatuma the only required JS ndio to reduce that bundle ya
bundle size.
Yeah, sa nini alikuwa anaongea vile si kuna time view hawako wanatumia virtual DOM. I think view 2 ama view 1
ikianza
haiko inatumia virtual DOM.
I think so.
Yeah, so hapa so bila virtual DOM so huwezi fanya hydration. Sasa hiyo ndio ilifanya ati consider virtual DOM like a workout fit. Yeah.
It sounds like a very interesting one.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, one is a React, yani die hard. Yani si unajua okay, jamaa before alikuwa ana trash view. Alafu sasa anaongea na the creator of view and Vite.
Yeah.
But then you see this Vio guy. He's the one who made React to drop CRA while embrace Vite. He raised that issue kabisa hadi sasa React ikabidi wamedrop create React app. So right now you either use Vite ama Next. Yeah, it's when usikize, it's very interesting. It has to be a competition. Unaona kama Next could have easily picked Vite as a bundler. Yes.
But they decided to go the long way to develop their own, your Turbo Pack.
Oh yeah, Vercel.
It's basically, it's just Neo family yote tu bado. Still part of React. They're very ingrained to React. So, but instead of just using Vite, why are you trying to recreate the wheel? Vite is already very popular in a plugin with so many things. It is supported by literally everything else. Tailwind supports Vite. Like, what does not support Vite? If you want to build a mobile application using some of easy frameworks, Vue, they already have an option to use Vite as a bundle as well.
Oh, nice.
So, like, it just makes more sense kutumia Vite. And Vite is fast because Vite uses inatumianga modules. Hot reloading, yes, but like that the speed, because even CRA has hot reload. Hata inakuanga nayo, if you save something, it still does the refresh. It's not just as fast. Difference inakuanga the speed of reloading and the speed of optimizing stuff. Kwa sababu Create React App is using Webpack. Webpack is not using modules. Webpack is using CommonJS.
Yes, CommonJS, ile ya kitambo.
Ile ya kitambo. And ES6 is much better at deciding what is being used and what is not being used.
Yeah.
Hapo ndio hiyo that slow behavior comes in kwa web. Na
si pia ndio inafanyanga Node sometimes ikuwe slow. Node has CommonJS under the hood.
But they are now supporting. They are now moving. Pole to they are moving into more mambo ya ES6. But you don't need CommonJS really in Node.
Oh.
Because you don't bundle. Node.
Yeah. You don't bundle. Hapo ni ku run to JavaScript.
You just run the server.
Yeah. Oh,
so
nice.
It doesn't make a difference.
Okay. So na nikuulize, apart from JS unaweza penda kuwa proficient na which other language?
Probably I want to learn Rust.
Kuna hype.
I just think it's an interesting language.
Mi ni .NET.
Your ecosystem ya Microsoft, I don't like it.
Why? Na ni open source.
I tried C#. I don't know. Sijui haiko ni bamba.
Na Java, have you ever tried Java?
I've tried Java also.
Hmm.
Hata Java.
Hizo ma-OOP.
Aziko click na mimi.
PHP?
PHP I did in 2014 or 2013 kitambo. Hata hiyo kunifurahisha. But maybe it's because I commit enough. Ile yenye nimecommit sana ni JS.
Yeah.
At the time I had committed to Python. I knew a lot of Python. And then the opportunities
Hazikuwa.
they are not the same with JavaScript. JavaScript
True.
is you can build anything, literally anything.
Yeah.
Kwa sababu of the community. The community is very vibrant. And so hiyo ndio kilikuwa inanivuta hiyo side because I think Python it serves a different purpose. Alafu the fact that to get started with JavaScript you don't need to install JavaScript. You just need a browser.
Yeah.
Hiyo ni another factor. You don't need to install Python and then sijui tena ufanye sijui nini.
Yeah.
It's so popular because it comes with your browser and every operating system has a browser. Yeah, so plus hiyo story tu yote ya JavaScript. The Mickey Mouse language and now it is runs literally everywhere. Kila mahali.
By the way, even you can't think of an application that doesn't run on JS.
Yeah.
Kama hata ni machine learning, si kuna TensorFlow nini version ya JS.
And the fact that unaona clearly all these big companies they know that JavaScript is inevitable.
It's inevitable. Yeah.
Kwa sababu number one, everybody uses the web.
Everybody.
It's the only programming language that is used by everyone. Kila mtu, anybody that has a device. Kila mtu, it doesn't matter whether it's a smartphone, a laptop, a TV, zote, all of them have to interact with JavaScript.
Hauonangi hata hizi malanguage za hata hawa akina PHP akina .NET usani za server huonangi unaambiwa pia you must know basics of JavaScript.
Yeah, you have to know some JavaScript.
Yes, so hiyo ni inevitable.
It's you cannot avoid it. So kuijua is obviously only a good thing. It cannot be a bad thing.
Exactly.
And plus it's a very dramatic language. Na mimi napendanga hiyo.
Hiyo drama.
Hiyo na drama mingi and I like that drama. Napendanga hiyo.
Framework was
hiyo mambo mingi na and then even the story of JavaScript is very inspiring.
Yeah.
Made in 1 week. It has all these inconsistencies. The only language in the whole programming industry that has 2 equality checks, that double equals and triple equals.
Yeah. Hizo za kunini.
There's no other language that has triple equals. It's always double equals. JS peke yake ndio iko na triple equals.
Oh, that's nice.
But that's because when the language was being developed, if Brendan Eich, the creator of JavaScript, when they were doing internal testing, one of the people who are consuming the language, while they were test, they were like, "Can you give us some sort of implicit type coercion, basically?
Yeah.
Can you give us type coercion?" So that's what he did. He included double equals for the language, and sasa ame have kulive na hiyo kitu hizi miaka zote. Broke computer science. Juu hiyo kitu ikuange kwa any other language, but because JavaScript is backward compatible, once you put something in the language huwezi kuitoa.
Yeah. Si kama hizi languages zingine unaweza toa vitu.
This one you cannot do it because you're going to break, because like if someone was to, ideally the point of backward compatibility is if I was to be running Netscape, which is hizo mabrowser za kitambo ile za kwanza before
hiyo hata ilikuwa ya kwanza.
Like nikitaka kurun JavaScript in Netscape I should be able to do it.
Yeah.
Because it's backward compatible. Sasa hapo ndio kina TypeScript wanakuja, because now TypeScript will you will tell it what version of JavaScript. If you want version 1, by all means it is available.
That's nice.
Na TypeScript naandika TypeScript ama
mimi TypeScript sijakuwa confident na kufika ati TypeScript. I still yani nataka kufika point yenye like si struggle hata kidogo na JS ndio sasa ni consider vitu kaa TypeScript.
Then you will be waiting for a very long time.
Mm.
Answer two. The trick is to just start. Don't wait until you're good with JavaScript. Do them zote mbili at the same time. You will be a better developer for it.
Na pia ati kwa market sahi ni imeanza kupop ka like the one of the major requirements. TS. Hata si JS, TS.
TS. Companies now want TypeScript. They want to write their application in TypeScript.
So I'll look into TS. Na wewe si mtu wa kwanza kuniambia ati niangalie TS.
Angalia TypeScript.
Na si ati ukue umeiva ile mbaya ati ndio.
Wewe tu basics tu.
Yeah.
You will be fine.
Na pia lakini me and I think that a developer should know one OOP language vizuri.
Why OOP?
Sab inakupatianga perspective ingine ya ku write code. Unajua ukishinda na kina JS na hata sasa kaa saa hii ukiandika React hautawahi fanya OOP. So hutawahi jua another paradigm of writing code. But ukikuwa na language ka JS alafu ujue another OOP language, I think hakuna kitu itawahi kukusurprise. That's my opinion definitely.
OOP, what it gives you, just forces you to think about things in objects.
Yes.
Akunanga, just makes your code uniform. So you don't have like imperative coding, you don't have declarative coding, you don't have functional. Like everything has to fit into that box.
Yes.
Now that makes sense if it is computer science based 100%. If your aim is to stay in line with computer science principles, then by all means, you can. Kama Java, those things have been built purely on a computer science foundation.
True.
That's why Zina follow hizo paradigms, because paradigms are for who? They are not for like your average Joe web developer. They are not. They are for engineers, because engineers are obsessed with uniformity.
Yeah, exactly.
In a certain way.
Na kufollow a pattern. Hawapendi ati mara kuna hii.
Exactly. Engineers the old engineers like things that way. Like things should be predictable. Hence we have paradigms. Even design patterns like factory pattern. Any of these design patterns zenye zinakuanga kwa languages, they are not used that much nowadays because we are moving away from following strict rules to now just applicability. Do you have something at the end of the day? Yes, I do. Okay, fine. Doesn't matter whether you used OOP, whether you used functional, whether you used declarative. Doesn't matter. That's why zinaenda zikiisha pole pole. You don't hear people talking about design patterns so much nowadays. So you have to understand where it came from. Like, why do I need OOP? See, I could just have a language that does not force me to think in objects.
So
naona hiyo ni barrier. That's a barrier. Because you cannot write the way you think. You don't think about things in objects. You don't see your friend unaona object. That's not how we think. So unaona JS is easy to follow because it's not forcing you to think in objects. It's allowing you to think in whatever way you want. It's multi-paradigm. So you want objects, they can do objects. And by the reason walitoka from class-based components, new overhead. It's so much code. Kuandika component using classes is
it was too much.
It is a lot. Then you have to bind events because of the way JavaScript is with objects.
You have to bind. Binding can change the this keyword.
This keyword, exactly. So your that extra overhead of before you start writing React, you must know OOP. That is coming from people who already know OOP. You would not write a whole library based off of OOP if you do not know OOP.
True.
And Sunona, OOP is not that accessible to people who are not doing computer science.
That's a very solid point.
So that's where we move. That's where they are moving it. And it's also just easier. Even mambo ya hooks and all the, like, JavaScript is just a very good It's a very nice language. It has
It's an all-rounder.
iko na kila kitu. Because hata Kenya we are doing here with React. Most of these things, the way they are behaving, it's just functions to the JavaScript, scoping and closures and
Yes.
hiyo tuna tunaendelea.
Getters and setters.
Getters and setters, proxies, kama Vue inatumianga proxies sana. So but pia it's trying to avoid hiyo mambo ya mutating things directly by having a proxy. A proxy is like a go between your real object and something that is representing your real object. Anytime if you use a reactive piece of information kwa Vue, kusema ref something. If you're trying to make a fetch request, alafu you want to return an array of objects. So unaona kuambia proxy, it doesn't tell you object.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Tells you
kumbe.
proxy.
Oh, sasa ndio nimeelewa.
Nakwambianga proxy.
Kwa dev,
Proxy is
unaonanga
JavaScript.
hapo kwa dev tool.
Hiyo ni JavaScript. If you just Google proxy kwa JavaScript, that's normal JavaScript.
Oh, okay. Yes?
Nataka kuwa na hiyo video umenitumia saa hii.
Oh, sawa.
So utapatana kesho.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Eh.
Thanks so much, manzi.
Haya poa.
Haya.
Haya.